Slowly, she returned to the white hen in her hand. She was down to the pin feathers when Sidney walked in with a small basket of mail. "All ready?" she asked him. "No. I just thought I'd finish it up in here." "It'll be at least an hour, maybe 2. What are you doing that for?" He pointed at the pile of feathers on the floor. "That's the way I got it." "Call him." "You want me to call him back here?" "No, I'm just about finished now. He knows better than that. Where is he?" Sidney moved toward the door. "Sit down, Sidney. Don't bother yourself." "I'm already bothered. I can't run a house like this with everybody doing whatever comes to mind. Sit down, I say. Hen's done." He sat at the table and began sorting letters, circulars, magazines, and putting them into piles. "Maybe we should look for somebody else. I'll speak to Mr. Street. It's not worth the trouble, Sidney, unless you can guarantee the next one won't be worse. On balance, he's still reliable, and he does keep the place up. You got to give him his due." "You don't sound like yourself, Undine." He looked at her heavy white braids sitting on her head like a royal diadem. "Oh, I'm fine, I guess." But her voice was flat, like a wide river without any undertow at all. "I never heard you stand up for Yardman when he does something contrary to what you tell him." "I'm not standing up for him. I just think he's a whole lot better than nobody and a little bit better than most." "You're the one doing the plucking. I'm trying to make it easier for you, not me." "He is easier for me. I was just thinking how I used to be able to get my own yard hens. Not no more. If they tear loose from me, they're free. I can't chase them anymore. I don't even know if I got the strength to wring their necks." "Well, what you don't have the strength for, a yard man is supposed to do. I don't want you running all over the yard after chickens, killing them neither. We long past that, Undine, long past that." He rested his hands on a letter for a minute, as he recollected the bloody, long-legged girl in the back of Televetti Poultry, sitting with 3 grown women, ankle-deep in feathers, among the squawks of crated fowl. At their feet, 2 troughs of dead birds, one for the feathered ones, one for the newly plucked. "I know. And we're going to stay past it, too. Not if you start changing up on me, we won't. Not if you start letting people run over you, start changing the rules in the middle of the stream." He pushed the stack of magazines to one side. Undine laughed lightly. "You mean horse?" "What?" "Horse. Horse in midstream. Never mind. You know as well as anybody that I can handle Yardman. And you also know that I'm not changing up on you. That's not what you're going on about. You're edgy, and I understand. That makes 2 of us. 3, I guess, since the principal beauty locked herself in. She call you for anything yet?" "No, not a thing." "Me neither." "Why 3? J. Dean ain't bothered?" "Not as far as I can tell. She's laughing and swinging around in that coat." "Damn." "She says we're overdoing it, that Mr. Street'll have him out of here today. But what did he do it for? She say anything about that? I've been knowing him for 51 years, and I never would have guessed, not in a million years, he'd do something like this. Where does he think he is? Main line? Ain't no police out here. Ain't nobody hardly. He think that nigger came here and hid in his own wife's bedroom just to get a meal? He could have knocked on the back door and got something to eat. Nobody comes in a house and hides in it for days, weeks." Undine looked at her husband. Talk about changing up. She hadn't seen him this riled since before they were married. "I know," she says, "I know that. But J. Dean says it was a joke. He had too much liquor, and him and her had an argument, and—" She stopped. "And what?" "Can't finish, can you?" "No, 'cause it don't make a bit of sense. Not one bit. There's no point in gnawing on it, Sidney. Like a dog with a bone, swallow it or drop it. Can't do either one. You have to. It ain't your bone. You have taken leave of your senses, woman. It is my bone. And right now it's stuck in my craw. I live here, too. So do you, and so does J. Dean. My family lives here, not just his. If that nigger wants to steal something or kill somebody, you think he's going to skip us just 'cause we don't own it? Hell no. I sat up in that chair all night, didn't I? Mr. Street Slept like a log. He was snoring like a hound when I went in there this morning. He drank a lot, Nadine says. She reached into the oven and poked a baking potato. Ain't that much whiskey in the world make a man sleep with a wife raper down the hall. He didn't rape anybody, didn't even try. Oh, you know what's on his mind, do you? I know he's been here long enough and quiet enough to rape, kill, steal, do whatever he wanted, and all he did was eat. You amaze me. You really amaze me. All these years I thought I knew you. You're tired, honey. You didn't sleep hardly any at all with that gun in your lap, and carrying it around under your coat ain't making things better. You really ought to put it back where it belongs. Long as he's in this house, it belongs with me. Come on now. It's barely noon. Mr. Street'll get rid of him just like Jadine said. Then everything will be just like it was. Like it was? Like it was, huh? Not by a long shot. When I brought him his coffee and rolls, he never said a word. Just, more coffee, please. Undine, it's more than just being here, you know. I mean, Mr. Street had him stay in the guest room. The guest room. You understand me? Well? What do you mean, well? I don't know what you're driving at. Where do we sleep, Undine? Me and you? You heard me. We sleep where we're supposed to. Where's that? It's nice down there, Sidney, and you know it is. Sitting room, 2 bedrooms, patio, bath. But where is it? Over there. Over where? Up over the downstairs kitchen. Right. Up over the downstairs kitchen. Jadine sleeps up there with them. Jadine? Now I am through. You comparing Jadine to a stinking, ignorant swamp nigger? To a wild-eyed pervert who hides in women's closets? Do you know what he said to me? Hi. Before that. When I was bringing him down the stairs under the barrel of my gun. No, what did he say? Could he take a leak? A leak? A leak. I got him with his hands up and the safety off, and he wants to stop and pee. That's nerve, all right. Nerve? He's crazy, that's what. You understand me? Crazy. Liable to do anything. And I have to show him to the guest room and lay him out some fresh pajamas. The guest room right next to Jadine? I told her to keep that door locked and not to open it up for nobody. You should have left it at that. You didn't have to go creeping up there all night to make sure. Scared her to death. Wait a minute. Whose side are you on? Your side, naturally. Our side. I'm not arguing for him. I told you last night what I thought about it. I just want to calm you down. He's leaving, Sidney, but we're not. And I don't want no big rift between you and Mr. Street about where that Negro slept and why and so forth. I want us to stay here like we have been. The old man loves you, loves us both. Look what he gives us at Christmas. I know all about that. Stop. No slippers, no apron, stop. And look what he did for Jadine, just because you asked him to. You're going to break up with him, lose all that just because he got drunk and let a crazy hobo spend the night. We have a future here as well as a past, and I tell you, I can't pick up and move in with some strange new white folks at my age. I can't do it. Nobody's talking about moving. If you keep working yourself up, you'll rile him or do something rash. I don't know. If I stay on here, I have to know whether. See that? If. Already you saying if. Keep on and you'll have us over in them shacks in Queen of France. You want me shucking crayfish on a porch like those Marys? Do you? You know I don't. Then drop that bone. Drop it before it chokes you. You know your work. Just do what you're supposed to do. Here. Take him his potato. Finish the rest of the mail later. Just give Mr. Street his. He likes to read it while he eats, if you call that eating. And Sidney, don't worry yourself. Remember, Jadine's here. Nothing can happen to us as long as she's here. Sidney went out with the tray on which a steaming potato in a covered dish was situated to the left of an empty wine glass, a napkin, and a stack of mail. As the kitchen door swung on its hinges, Undine took a deep breath. She had surprised herself. Before Sidney came in, she was as nervous as he was. still tasting her breakfast, too confused to quarrel with Yardman about the unplucked hen. She didn't put any stock in Jadine's assurances, but when Sidney looked like he was falling apart, she'd pulled herself together and talked sense. Good sense. That was what surprised her. She talked sense she didn't know she had about a situation that both frightened and disoriented her. But in talking to Sidney, she knew what it was. The man was black. If he'd been a white bum in Mrs. Street's closet, well, she would have felt different. Sidney was right. It was his bone, whether they liked it or not, but she was right, too. He had to drop it. The man upstairs wasn't a Negro, meaning one of them. He was a stranger. She had made Sidney understand that. Mr. Street might keep him for 2 days, 3, for his own amusement. And even if he didn't steal, he was nasty and ignorant, and they would have to serve him anyway if Mr. Street wanted it. Clean his tub, change his bed linen, bring his breakfast to his bed if he wanted it, collect his underwear. Jesus. Call him sir. Step aside if they met him in the hall, light his cigarettes. Hold open his door. See to it there were fresh flowers in his room, books, a dish of mints. Shoot, she said aloud. That nigger's not going nowhere, no matter what they say. Undine picked up the chicken. Her fingers quickly found the joints they were searching for and broke each one. Then she removed the wings from its back. The hen's little elbows held a dainty V, as though protecting its armpits from the cold, although it was noon, and the water the breakfast rain had left in the mouths of the orchid was so hot it burned the children's fingers, or would have, if any children lived at L'Arbre de la Croix. But none did. So the stamens of the orchids went untickled, and the occupants of the lovely breezy house, with the perfectly beveled cabinets, heard no children's screams, and no tramp of red soldier ants marching toward the greenhouse, past the wash-house where a woman sat rubbing the dirt from her feet with one of 17 Billy Blast towels. Stacked before her, in 2 wicker baskets, were the other 16. Some everyday table napkins and tablecloths, assorted underwear and T-shirts, 4 white uniforms, 4 white shirts, a corset, 6 pairs of black nylon socks, and 2 thin cotton nightgowns. She was happy as she sat there cleaning her calluses. Her laundry load was getting smaller each week, and the bundle of clothes that traveled by motorboat to Cecile's in Queen of France was getting bigger and bigger. She knew quite well that she was supposed to be insulted by that, and when the opportunity arose, she managed to pout. But in her heart of hearts, she was happy. She put the black socks in a bucket to soak, and dropped the corset in a basin full of soapy water and vinegar. She made the Billy Blast towels the first load for the washing machine, since they took longest to dry. Once the machine began to agitate, she could sit for a while and attend to her own thoughts while she waited for Gideon to come by her. From the pocket of her dress, she pulled 2 wrinkled avocados and some smoked fish, and put them on a piece of newspaper and covered it all against flies with a stained Dior napkin. Then she disconnected the dryer, plugged in her hot plate, and set an old drip pot of coffee on to heat. She had no assigned lunch hour, so she ate while the laundry washed itself. It was such a pleasure. Washing for these people was child's play compared to the way she did it on Place d'Avant. But at least there she had the pleasure of gossip over the tubs. Here, there was mostly silence. Unless you counted the music that came from the serre chaude, which is why she could hear the soldier ants so clearly, and why she was so eager for Gideon to finish with the hens and join her on some pretext or other, for if the heavy one, with the braids crossed like 2 silver machetes on her head, caught them chatting in the wash-house or in the garden behind, she would fly into a rage, and her machetes would glitter and clang on her head. The silence was why she often brought Alma, and although the girl's chatter was so young it made her head ache, it was better than listening to soldier ants trying one more time to enter the greenhouse, and being thwarted as usual by the muslin dipped in poison and taped to the doorsill. She was sorry Alma couldn't come today. Gideon and she had a bet on how long the chocolate eater could last. Gideon said, long as he wants, till New Year, while she said no. The chocolate eater's heart would betray him, not his mind or stomach. And as they rode back to Queen of France, she raised the bet to 150,000 francs instead of the 100,000 she began with. She laughed and spat in the sea as she raised him, so confident was she. For she had seen evidence of the man who ate chocolate. In the wash-house, in the trees, in the gazebo, down by the pond, in the tool shed, near the greenhouse. And it was he who brought the soldier ants onto the property with his trail of foil paper containing flecks of chocolate that the ants loved and sought vigorously. She had seen him in a dream smiling at her as he rode away, wet and naked on a stallion. So she knew he was in agreement with her, and any day now he would be discovered or reveal himself. As soon as she got out of the jeep that very morning, she was convinced that today was the day. A great rush of butterflies was what she noticed first, and later, as she stood in the courtyard waiting for Machete Hair to bring the basket of clothes, she instantly saw that the machetes were not clanging now. They, like their owner, were subdued by fear, she thought. The chocolate man would be the cause of that. She could think of nothing else. Hurricane wind or magic doll, diamond back, or monkey teeth that would quiet those curved and clanging knives. Only the man who ate chocolate in the night and lived like a foraging animal and who was as silent as a star could have done it. She had eaten the fish and one avocado, and still Gideon had not come. She didn't want to start on the coffee because it ran right through her, and not having access to a toilet, she felt unwelcome even in the kitchen. She did not want to run off to the bushes behind the garden in the middle of his visit. She insisted she knew about the man before Gideon, although it was he who actually saw him first. She knew of his presence 12 days ago, long before he left the trail of chocolate foil paper, which she mistook for a fabricated attack against herself, made up by Machete Hair, who had asked her, point blank, had she been taking chocolate, and she had said, no, madam, over her shoulder, to every query without allowing her eyes to see the heavy one. Before that mistakable trail, he left the unmistakable one of his smell. Like a beast who loses his animal smell after too long a diet of cooked food, a man's smell is altered by a fast. She caught the scent 12 days ago. The smell of a fasting, or starving, as the case might be, human. It was a smell of human afterbirth that only humans could produce. A smell they reproduced when they were down to nothing for food. So a hungry man was on the grounds, or, as she said to Gideon, somebody's starving to death around here. And Gideon said, me, Therese. And she said, no, not you. A really starving somebody. And later that day, a bug-eyed Gideon crept over to her under the lime tree near the kitchen terrace and whispered that he'd seen a swamp woman dart out from behind some trees near the pond. Therese stopped scaling grouper fish and said that what he saw was what she smelled, and it couldn't be a swamp woman because they had a pitch-like smell. What he saw must have been a rider. So she took to bringing 2 avocados instead of 1, and leaving the second one in the wash-house. But each third day when she returned, it was still there, untouched by all but fruit flies. It was Gideon who had the solution. Instead of fixing the sash on the window of the pantry as he was ordered, he removed one of its panes and told Machete Hair he was having trouble getting another. The heavy one fumed and removed perishables and things that attracted flies into the other kitchen until he could repair the window. In the meantime, they hoped the horseman would have access to the food left there. And soon they saw bits of folded foil in funny places, and they knew he had gotten from the pantry chocolate at the very least. Once Gideon saw an empty Evian bottle in the gazebo. Then they knew he had fresh water, too. Therese removed the coffee pot from the stove and put it back 5 times before she heard Gideon's footsteps. She poked her head out of the doorway, grinned, and started to speak. "Shh," he said, "shh." His fingers touched his lips, but Therese could not restrain herself. "Something's going on, I can tell." Then, as he stepped inside and came close, she saw his shirt. "You slaughter the hen, or the hen slaughter you?" Gideon held up one hand to shush her, and with the other pulled the door shut. "Open the door, man," she complained. "Too hot in here." Gideon stood fast. "Listen," he said. "He's in the house. In it. All out in the open. I saw him. I knew it. I knew it." Therese's whisper was close to a shout. Gideon went to the coffee pot. 2 cups were sitting on top of the folding table, and he filled them both. "A little fridge out here wouldn't be a bad idea," he said. "Just one of them little ones, like he got out in the greenhouse. Plug it up right there." "Talk, man. Stop going on about a fridge. Wouldn't you like a little cold beer or chilled wine from time to time?" "Cold beer?" She looked at him in amazement. "That country ruined you, man. Stop fooling with me. Where did you see him?" "In the window. Her window." He took the chicken head and feet from his shirt and wrapped them in newspaper. "Doing what?" "Looking, just looking. A sheet or something wrapped around him, but bare naked on top." "Did he see you see him?" "No, don't think so. I pretended I was taking off my cap to scratch my head and looking off up in the trees." "He didn't do anything? Move?" "Nope, just looked around. Then I turned and walked back away." "Alone? Was she with him?" "Can't say. But it was in her room. Get what I mean? And I saw her up there before, naked as a worm when I was fixing to put up the tree. She jumped back, but didn't do no good. She don't know I got eyes in the top of my head." Then next, about an hour or so later, there he was. Naked too, almost. Just a piece of white stuff around his waist. You reckon they got it on?" He had stopped trying to appear uninterested and was openly enjoying the possibilities. "I told you," said Therese. "He's a horseman. Come down here to get her. He was just skulking around, waiting for his chance." Maybe. Gideon looked at her milky eyes. "You damn near blind, but I have to hand it to you. Some things you see better than me. Otherwise, why would a big, strong-looking man be hiding around here like that? Why this house all the time? Why not over the other side, or up the road where those Filipinos are? He must have been looking for somebody specific." "The chippy, the fastas," said Therese. "That's why he went straight up to her room, because he knew she was here. He saw her from the hills. Maybe he'll run her out of here." "Back to the States, huh? Or France, even, where that big box came from. Maybe he's not all right, and maybe he's an old boyfriend, and he's the one sent her the box, Gideon. Hold on, you're going wild. And Machete here, she don't like it. Tried to keep them apart, but it didn't work. He find her, swim the whole ocean big, till he find her, eh? Make Machete here too mad. Now she tell her bow-tie husband." Therese sat on the wooden chair and rocked in the telling, pressing her fingers into Gideon's shoulder as each new sequence presented itself to her. "Bow-tie get mad. Very. 'Cause he lives near Machete here's thumb." The more she invented, the more she rocked, and the more she rocked, the more her English crumbled, till finally it became dust in her mouth, stopping the flow of her imagination, and she spat it out altogether and let the story shimmer through the clear cascade of the French of Dominique. Gideon couldn't stop her, so he tried to gulp coffee while warding off the jabs to his shoulder. When she abandoned English, he stopped listening, for it was in French that she had tricked him into leaving the States after 20 years and coming back to Dominique to handle family property. So he shut his ears and tried to finish his coffee, submitting to the shoulder jabs out of deference to her, because she was his mother's baby sister, and because of a grudging respect for her magic breasts, and because she had been able to trick him, of all people, with 34 letters in 15 years, begging him to come home and take care of the property, by which she must have meant herself, because when he got there, that's all there was left. No land, no hills of coffee bush. Just Therese, 2 years his senior, and a cement house whose roof had to be put back on after every hurricane, which meant 4 times a year. When he looked at the house, one of a dozen scattered over the Emerald Hill, and discovered that the 130 arpents he'd remembered from his childhood belonged, like the Emerald Hills, to the Frenchmen who lived in Guadeloupe, and that except for the kitchen garden and the village garden on the riverbank, there was no land to care for, only this laughing, lying crone with a craving for apples, he wasn't even angry. Just amazed that he had believed those 34 letters, written in perfect French by the priest at first, and then by an acolyte, describing the burden of managing so much property. Too much for an old lady, who, nevertheless, always thought of a way to get a $10 money order out of him, and asking over and over again to make sure he brought apples when he came, or to send them, and if he would let her know when that would be, she would alert a friend at customs, because apples were contraband and could not be imported into Dominique, which was true because only French-grown fruit and vegetables could arrive at that port or be sold in the stores. And ships unloaded wilted lettuce, thin rusty beans, and pithy carrots every month. A hardship for the rich and the middle class, neither of whom would consider working a kitchen garden, except, of course, the American, who made it a hobby, and were dependent on the market. But it was of no consequence to the poor, who ate splendidly from their gardens, from the sea, and from the avocado trees that grew by the side of the road. Only Therese had tasted apples once when she was 7, and again when she was 35, and had a craving for them akin to hysteria. When Gideon arrived in 1973, with 12 apples hidden in the lining of his electric blue leisure suit, which Therese's friends at customs noticed, but for $2 U.S. ignored, her gratitude was so complete, he didn't get on the next plane back, as he threatened. After all, he hadn't left much, just U.S. citizenship, the advantage of which was the ability to send an occasional $10 money order, buy a leisure suit, and watch TV. Most of the friends of his youth had immigrated to France, but the stories of their lives there were so heartbreaking, he'd chosen Quebec instead, although he had to wait until he was 22 for a visa, and then he arrived in the coat pocket, so to speak, of a Canadian farmer. And 2 years later, by much subterfuge, including marriage to an American Negro, got into the States, where money orders, leisure suits, and TV abounded. Now that he'd come back, what was there to do but build a new roof after each hurricane, find a little work, and wait for Carnival? At first, he was ashamed before his family and friends. Just as Therese had lied to him, so had he lied to her about the wealth he had accumulated in the States. Now there he was for all the world to see, building another temporary roof, looking for tourist tips, eyeing women at the bars, just like before, with no suitcase of American dollars, just 12 apples and a leisure suit. Humiliating. Who but an ass would go back to Dominique with no more than what he'd had when he left? Those who wished desperately to come back, from France, Quebec, New York City, or wherever, could not, would not, unless they were accompanied by the college certificates or money they had gone to find. He spoke English very well, however, and that could have been something of an asset on the island. But at his age, with no certificate, and out of touch with friends who could make a way for him, he could not carry luggage at the airlines, or wait tables at the Old Queen. So he drifted to the docks for a few days' work, or got a lucky day collecting fares for a taxi man until finally all of his 40 years of immigrant labor paid off, when an American who owned a house on Ile des Chevaliers came to stay and needed a regular handyman gardener with boat skill, English, and a manner less haughty than that of the local blacks. For in spite of the fact that they built their houses 4 times a year, the natives of Dominique did not hide the contempt they felt in their hearts for everybody but themselves. Gideon got over the shame. The work at Ile des Chevaliers, which began for a season and had lasted 3 years, helped, and so did the fact that the jokes and insults heaped on him by his family were nothing compared to the humiliations of immigrant life, which U.S. citizenship did not change. Also, the thought of being able to die in those coffee-growing hills, rather than in those lonely stateside places, gave him so much happiness. He could not hold a grudge or sustain anger for more than an hour. Unlike Therese, whose hatreds were complex and passionate, as exemplified by her refusal to speak to the American Negroes, and never even to acknowledge the presence of the white Americans in her world. To effect this, she believed all she had to do was not look at them, or rather, not look at them while they looked at her. So her face was always turned away when they addressed her, and her glance, when it was not on her work, went to a distant point on the horizon, which she could not have seen if her life depended on it. What they took for inattentiveness was a miracle of concentration. "Hush, Therese," said Gideon. "They can hear you in the harbor. Finish making up your romance in your head. I have to go." He stood up and rubbed the abused shoulder. "But you've forgotten one thing in your story. One important thing. I said I saw him in the house. In the open. Open. Get it? Now, there are 5 people living there, not 3. And 2 of them is white. And the same 2 is the boss of everything as well. While you're making up your story about what this one thinks and this one feels, you have left out the white bosses. What do they feel about it? It's not important who this one loves and who this one hates, and what bow tie do and what machete hair don't do if you don't figure on the white ones and what they thinking about it all. He tapped her on the chest bone and left her sitting there with a half-finished plot on her tongue. Therese unplugged the hot plate and put the last of the Billy Blast towels in the dryer. Then she put all the white shirts and uniforms into the washing machine. The load was too tight and too much, but she had wasted time gossiping with Gideon, so she left it that way. She sat down again on the chair and began sloshing the black socks of the bow-tie husband. It was true, she thought. She had forgotten the white Americans. How would they fit into the story? She could not imagine them. In her story, she knew who the others were. The chocolate-eating man was a lover. The fast-ass a coquette who had turned him down. The other 2 were the traditional hostile family. She understood that, but now she had to get a grasp of the tall, thin American who played in the greenhouse, whom she had never seen clearly and certainly never spoken to, and also the wife with the sunset hair and milk-white skin. What would they feel? She realized then that all her life she thought they felt nothing at all. Oh, well, yes, she knew they talked and laughed and died and had babies, but she had never attached any feeling to any of it. She thought of her priest, the shopkeepers, the gendarmes, the schoolteachers Alma talked about, the 2 little French girls she took care of one day when the governess ran away, and the hundreds of French babies who used to nurse at her magical breasts. What went on inside them? Inside. Therese resented the problem, and the necessity for solving it to get on with the story. "What difference does it make?" she murmured. "I don't know what they would think about him, but I know for certain what they would do about him. Kill him. Kill the chocolate-eating black man. Kill him dead. Ah, poor thing. Poor thing. He dies, and the fast ass is brought low at last. Too late, bitch. too late you discover how wonderful he really was, how gentle, how kind, and you are full of remorse. But too late, cow. Too late. You will never have him now. And you, Miss Shetty Hair, and you, Bow Tie, you will think everything is all right now he's dead, but no! You will suffer too, because the fast ass is grief-stricken and will blame you for his untimely death and hate you forever. So, you can go back to the States, the whole pack of you, and choke to death on your big red apples.
This ends side 2 of cassette 3 of Tar Baby. Please fast forward to the end before loading cassette 4.